This week saw the end of Titans Beast World, the latest big DC Comics event, and I'm here to wrap this bad boy up. Let's talk about whether it's good or bad, whether it's worth the read or not. And obviously I have Jim from Weird Science DC. How you doing, Jim?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. The Beast World is over, and yeah, I'm interested to even hear what you thought of it.
We're not going to review the final issue here. This is a wrap-up of the event in totality. If you want to hear our full review of the comic book, you have to go over to the Patreon. But getting into it, these are my 5 big takeaways from Titans Beast World. Number 1, this was probably the most fun DC event since Dark Knight's Metal. DC events have been really dreary and dark and dull and boring. And this one was at least a lot of fun, especially issues 1 through 4.
It actually set up a pretty fun concept that I was worried might not be able to be event worthy because it did seem like so much fun. It kind of seemed like furries taking over the world. Like, where are we going to go from there? But it did have that fun factor to it, which a lot of the more recent DC things have not had.
You know, we got to see Gar become Garo, a big star version of himself. We got to see Tentacles be knocked off. We got to see him get killed. The entire world is turned into animals. They didn't turn Batman into a bat. They turned him into a wolf, which I thought was a pretty smart deal. Lots of frenetic action. I think that really upped the enjoyment factor by a long shot. You know, I enjoyed seeing Giganta turn into an enormous bear trying to take down a city.
That's what I liked about it as a whole, is that while it's trying to set up some big things, obviously, which you would want to have, it actually still had a bit of a sense of humor in it and actually surprised me at points because of that. Like you said about Batman, you're just waiting for Batman to become a bat and he becomes a werewolf. I'm like, all right, that's pretty fun. And there were bits and things in there for people that are fans of a character to see, oh my God, like what about my character and what happens? And I thought, again, yeah, overall it had that little sense of humor that has been missing, I think, from a lot of the DC stuff lately.
Yeah, I definitely think DC Comics could do a lot better if they stopped going so much dark multiverse. It felt like everything had to be Night Terrors or Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths or Dark Knight's Death Metal future state where everything's kind of bleak and everything. And it felt like it was a good change to get kind of back to basics. Unfortunately, Jim, it appears that has not done much for sales, because the second big takeaway is that it appears the sales on this event were absolutely dreadful, which you wouldn't really expect for a DC comic event. All the tie-ins essentially were bust across the line. It didn't really lift sales on the Titans mainline series. And while this was a change for the fun and the better, in my opinion, as a DC Comics fan, it doesn't seem like people expected that or their minds were changed.
Yeah, and being somebody who reviews the stuff individually, I did see a lot of times where I said, I like it. I really like this. You should check it out. People are fatigued from these events fully. They don't think, like, you try to explain to them, but it might be past the time that they even want to be explained to. A lot of these events have fallen flat. I mean, one of the most recent two, if you consider Gotham War, but also Night Terrors, they haven't been good. I mean, they've been atrocious. And I think people have been kind of, they don't want to get involved in that thing. And then you add in tie-ins that really didn't mean anything. And so by the end, I think that it is a shame. I think this is one of the better ones in a while, but I don't think that many people are reading it.
Do you think the name Titans kind of hurt the sales or potential sales on this? Because it's not really just a Titans event. The entire Justice League is there. You know, you're seeing the entire Superman family in some parts. So it was definitely the entire DC universe.
The problem is a lot of people might not be reading the Titans thinking it ties into that fully. And it did, but you could jump into this and maybe they should just call it Beast World, something like that. Yeah. I just kept wanting to call it Beast War at the beginning, but still I think that was a bit of a misplay for the title.
Well, and I also think they missed some of the selling points on this. They didn't tell anybody that Ivan Reis was going to be the artist. They should have been putting that in the headline.
Yeah.
You know, the guy from freaking Blackest Night is back.
Yep.
To do a big event.
Too bad he wasn't on the whole thing, and then you go. But even then, Lucas Mayer did an okay job, but when Ivan Reis was on, you really could push that as a selling point because the issues looked fantastic.
Yeah, but I do think maybe Tom Taylor also has kind of ruined his reputation at this point. You know, he did the Superman Son of Kal-El stuff, didn't really go well, got canceled really early. He's been on Nightwing for a while. Book got really boring and stale and hasn't been enjoyable for quite some time. He has been on this Titans ongoing series. You know, they're out there, you know, doing Arbor Day specials and planting trees, you know, and removing prisons from the most dangerous city in the entire Earth, as if that was a smart idea. So I don't think there was a lot of really momentum built up in Titans and Tom Taylor either.
And I think that in his regular in continuity writing, a lot of people have complained. He's even to the base deal of it. He plays it really safe with the characters. John Kenney can't punch people. Nightwing can do everything great. This Beast World had a little bit of an edge to it, but like you said, it still had that humor. And I think it did fit more along the lines of like a Deceased or, something like that instead of what he's doing normally. And I think they should have pushed that as well.
Now, my third big takeaway is by the end, Amanda Waller absolutely takes over the event, and really DC Comics moving into the future. We are moving up to the Trinity of Evil. She's going to be the headliner, Amanda Waller, with Queen Brainiac, who hasn't even been introduced, and Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. Yes, she's always been a government official that was doing things that weren't quite on the up and up, using the Suicide Squad and everything, but now she's like in charge of the president and stuff. In the end, it ended up kind of being about elevating Amanda Waller than elevating the Titans, which I think should have been the purpose of the event. And I thought by the end, it took away a lot of the fun that I was having. It
does. It is, and it ends up being a Waller event. It does. Now, whether or not you like it or not, it's going to depend on where you're going in with it. It makes a little bit of sense because she ended up losing everything. Now she's coming back. But the things that led into this are stuff like War for Earth 3 that I don't even see anybody referencing anymore, stuff that even happened before Death Metal. It kind of makes sense, but it is an elevation that seems out of nowhere just because we haven't dealt. And all of a sudden, she's everywhere. She's in every book. And I think that people are getting a little sick of her. We'll see what it leads to then, but it is an odd play. I will admit, I'm not as down on it as some, but I still need to see more and have some things explained overall than just having her shoved at you. And it does feel like she's shoved at you.
Yeah, she's in Titans, she's in Green Arrow, she's in Wonder Woman, she's in anything Suicide Squad, she's in anything Peacemaker. Like, I've had enough Amanda Waller at this point. Also, like, the weird thing that Dr. Hate, we are doing spoilers here, ends up being the demon side of Raven on this one. And we do see Dr. Hate introduced at the very end of Night Terrors, another event that Waller was trying to show people the heroes for what they really are. They're really the monsters or whatever.
Yep.
Why would the demon version of Raven want to work for Waller?
Here's the thing. This is the weird thing about what's going, and that's where I say the explanation. If you end up having the idea, oh my God, the demon self of Raven is Dr. Hate, that's okay. That sounds cool to some, but you never get really an explanation of how Waller was able to convince this. It just seemed like, hey, you want to get involved? When you see at the end of Night Terrors, it's like, you want to get involved? Yeah. All right, boom. This happened in the Green Arrow stuff where Merlin out of nowhere says, oh, I did all this by getting time travel tech from him. It doesn't make sense, but you have to go with it. And eventually you stop going with it. So it doesn't I like the whole reveal, but I don't like that we don't get much of an explanation to go forward. But it does set up some cool things maybe in the Titans book going forward, which did need kind of a kickstart in my mind, though talking to people, nobody's reading it, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's just weird. She didn't have any leverage over this demon. She didn't have something that the demon wanted. She didn't make her a promise that she was going to do this or that. She was like, yeah, I'll join up and try and destroy the world and try and frame the Titans and heroes so they can see them for the monsters that you think they are. Like,
the only thing you get is her saying, hey, you want to join up? Next target, Titans. But that's not enough. You have to explain things. I guess the reason you didn't get explanation at first was that would kind of show your hand maybe, but we need explanations. And this is just like you're supposed to say, oh, bad Raven. Okay, that makes sense. But it doesn't really, there's a lot of other things that are not explained that kind of, are starting to add up. And I'm worried about that. Yeah,
that's definitely another takeaway we won't get into, is that the final issue is kind of contrivances to comic book, where a lot of things just happen because they needed to happen.
They need to happen, yeah.
I guess the fourth big takeaway, and this isn't a new takeaway, the Beast World tie-ins are absolutely awful. These are some of the writers that were working on the tie-ins: Sina Grace, Megan Fitzmartin, Jarrett Williams, Sam Maggs, Grace Ellis, Chuck Brown, Nicole Main, Steve Orlando, a who's who of who's not. And they're just these stupid anthology books that don't really do anything to elevate the story or further the plot or show a side quest or anything. It's just little snippets or moments in time to show you what other heroes are kind of tied up in. And they just are awful. They're beyond awful at this point.
They fell flat. And where you said, and you gave right praise to the idea, oh my God, it was a little different. Batman turned into a wolfman, not a bat. In these tie-ins, all you got were, oh, there's Ratcatcher turns into a rat. Even that doesn't make sense because he's a rat catcher, not a rat. Somebody said to me, should have turned into a cat. That would have made more sense. But even the good writers, you said, you had Robert Venditti, one of your, if not your favorite writer. He had nothing to work with. I mean, it's not even just that you have bad writers telling awful, awful stories. Even the great writers struggled to actually do something with it because there's not enough room in these anthologies and there isn't much of a story beyond. I mean, I like the event and I like the idea. I had fun with it, but it's running thin when you get to these tie-ins that you really don't have anything to do. And this is why, as we said earlier, people weren't buying a lot of things. The tie-ins just bombed. And I think people they see the pattern. We get the same pattern each time in these things. It's starting to wear thin with a lot of people, so they just avoid it, knowing also that when it's done, things will, I'll hear what happened or the other books will catch up. So these events become not so eventful, and it's a shame.
Yeah, really the only ongoing that really tied into it, I think Action did for one issue, but it really was it was Titans that tied up like one of the big story elements introduced in the very first issue of Beast World with the Brother Righteous, I believe, is the one that wakes up.
Brother Eternity. Yeah, Brother Eternity. Yep, yeah.
He wakes up the Necro Star, and it turns out he has ties to Firestar.
Yep.
He turned on her family.
He's Tamaranian. Yeah,
and he ends up taking control of Tempest.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that story sucked too.
Yeah, it did. And Nightwing tried to tie in, but really what you were getting there is Kitten Damien as Mr. Mittens doing some Fight Club. And it meant nothing. And
cover.
Again, this is, just to get a meme cover. And so these are now that had a bit of a sense of humor, but not really good. That kind of fell flat. Again, these tie-ins and things like that, they're just not hitting. And that suffers when then the main book, people don't take it, seriously or don't want to read it because of all that.
Yeah, so this is my final takeaway, and it's more of a question than a takeaway. In the end, did Titans Beast World elevate the Titans to Justice League status? Which I believe was the purpose of the event. They replaced the Justice League. The Justice League had disbanded, because it was Nightwing and the Titans' turn to kind of take over and protect the world or whatever. Never really established that in Titans, never really established that in any other DC title. Certainly the Titans were front and center in this book, but there's certainly a lot of Justice Leaguers. By the end, I'm not thinking the Titans are the Justice League. In fact, you can kind of say Gar deciding that he needed to become a Starro, so that he could be taken over by Dr. Hate and everything, led to all this happening in the first place. And the Justice League wouldn't have been stupid enough to do that.
Yeah, that maybe the Titans weren't ready. And even then, you did have Batman when they were in that whole conference deal. And it seemed like Batman didn't like the plan, but he said, well, I'll defer to Nightwing because, and it didn't work out right. It didn't work out very well. And it was weird because I guess you're supposed to go both ways. It's supposed to elevate Waller with her making the world hate the Titans. But in the meantime, I think that the reader was supposed to see behind the scenes, behind the manipulations, that the Titans were bigger and better. Really, if you go by the recent developments, they might be equal to the Justice League because everybody fails recently. The Justice League dies, comes back, fails. So that's kind of been the MO, and I kind of wish it wasn't that. It's weird. I think that Tom Taylor might disagree and think that he elevated the Titans, but only because, look, they didn't bow down to anybody, and they helped the press. It was weird. It was weird by the end, and I think that we need the Justice League back desperately.
And there's some weird dialogue in there. We're like, we don't need to fear these people. They're just hypnotized. I'm going, how fucking dumb are these Titans? Like, they're not hypnotized. Those are feral animals at this point. They're killing people.
Yeah, there were points where it looked like there were some things like, okay, now we're talking, and then they say things like you just said, or do things that didn't quite make sense. And it's funny because it almost feels like Tom Taylor also wants to show these growing pains of a Titans team, but you can't have growing pains when you've already replaced the Justice League. You need to go forward. And they have kind of failed while everything's happening on their watch now, and they keep failing. It's just an odd play, but that's kind of how DC Comics has been. Everybody always fails. Batman can't catch a break. Nobody ends up. So it's kind of the thing, but leading towards this big event, it's the setup of everybody hating the heroes. I don't love that either, but we'll see how it works out.
In the end, I would say this is an enormous failed experiment. Everything leading up to Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, the death of the Justice League, and then them coming back, and them going to the sideline because it's time for the Titans to step up, but they never really step up. And by the time that they do step up in Beast World, the Justice League are right there with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, back in the day, if you had different events like a 52, things like that, where you didn't have the Trinity, so you had to deal, but they're still there, and they keep popping up, and they keep solving the problems. And even when they're not there, you're wondering where the hell are they, because they are the big heroes. But the thing is that there's never really a great explanation of why the Justice League bailed. They end up after Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths like, yeah, I don't think this works. But when are the Titans going to because they're failing as well. I mean, they're not exactly doing well. So why wouldn't you get the Justice League back? And it's a shame in this that they didn't come up with a better plan, maybe a combination, almost like a Justice League Unlimited, have all the characters so they could all shine. But they didn't do that. It's just very odd.
Yeah, I would love to see the Titans elevated because I do like the Titans. I like a lot of the heroes. And this is a fun event. I guess in the end, talking about the bigger point, is it good or bad? Yeah.
That's
you read the main series.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, especially the first 4 issues. And I don't particularly love the landing on this one, but just taken as a whole, it's perfectly fine. I think a lot of people will enjoy reading Beast World 1 through 6.
Yeah,
I don't think people are going to enjoy reading the Titans tie-in. Yeah. They're not going to enjoy the tie-in anthology books because they're not very good.
And isn't that the problem? I mean, one of the things is you have this event, and if people aren't reading it, maybe all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm going to check into this tie and see what's it about because it involves one of their favorite writers, or that'd be a stretch, but, or a character they like.
The Star City book had some good writers.
It did, and that was the best one. That shows. You get good writers, you get the best books. So you go into them. And if that was the case, like, oh, I want to see you're going to be turned off because nothing really goes on in those. They were cash grabs, 100%. Nothing that it didn't do anything. And then when you get the main story, I hate when the tie-ins that are supposed to elevate things, like you said, the Titans should have been elevated. They weren't. The tie-ins did nothing but, devalue the actual main deal. And it's a shame because I do think it was one of the better events in quite some time.
Ivan Reit's art, at least on the first 2 issues, comes in, illustrates a couple or portions of the last 2 issues. That was a huge selling point. I don't think people even knew that was happening. And now he's not a DC comic book creator anymore. He's left DC and he's exclusive to Ghost Machine. Giving him a nice farewell would have been something. It would have meant something.
Yeah.
Because truly, in my mind, the last great DC Comics event is Darkest Night.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's both of us. We talk about this all the time where they just haven't really hit. And a lot of it, they're overblown. And that's what happens at this point. People are fatigued. A lot of people are gone, so they're not going to check it out. I mean, DC is really trying their best to get people for not reading their comics. But when you come down to the whole play, it was a good event. I hope that people give it a chance, after the fact maybe, because it was fun, but just read the main event.
Do not read the omnibus.
No. Don't go waste your money or time on that. Yeah, just end up reading the 6-issue, event. It's pretty good.
Now, if you are looking for a full review of Titans Beast World number 6, the final issue, Jim and I have already done that. We've done that on the Patreon during the Hot or Not podcast. If you were unaware of that, Jim and I talk about the newest releases from Marvel, DC, and indie comic books every single week, Thursday, exclusive to the Patreon. And obviously, we have a lot of fun with that, Jim, because you guys over Weird Science review more comic books than anybody.
We try. People will disagree with that and throw shade at me, but yes, I think that we do. And and we try to give them their fair shake.